Are some non-playoff teams from a year ago starting to figure this thing out? Welcome to NHL Wraparound Short Shifts for Friday, October 24th, 2025. Vic and Neil heading into the last weekend of October because a week from now is going to be Halloween. And what are you dressing up as?
I'm dressing up as daylight savings time because I don't want it to leave. And it's going away on November 2nd.
I'm dressing up as a podcaster.
Oh, that's a good mask for you.
It is, and I'm wearing it right now.
Yeah, and I'm wearing mine.
Two average-looking guys having at it, talking a little bit of hockey. Always looking for a little bit of a theme to get things going. Some of the clubs from a year ago and even beyond that have been traditional non-playoff clubs are starting to turn things around. Again, we still have a small sample size. We've only played about 10% of the schedule, but you can see signs of light. Exhibit A. First game of the night on Thursday. Chicago Blackhawks beat Tampa 3-2. Ryan Donato with his second goal of the game. With 54 seconds left in regulation, a real lazy back check by Nikita Kucherov enabled Donato to pick up the rebound of a shot. Kucherov holding at 999 career points, perhaps being a little bit overzealous, wanting to head up ice to get that goal in overtime or at least get an assist for that milestone point. Didn't happen. But the bigger piece here, Neil, is this is a game the Chicago Blackhawks do not win a season ago.
And maybe a game that Tampa Bay Lightning doesn't lose a year ago. So for Chicago, it shows real improvement. And for Tampa, they got to be concerned. Starting the season the way they have, 1-4-2, the same record as the lowly Sharks that we'll get to in a moment. John Cooper has got to be concerned. I don't care that you have Victor Hedman, that you have Nikita Kucherov, that you have Vasilevsky, and all the rest of the players. 1-4-2 as a whole. To get to 500, you got to win 3 straight games. And so Tampa Bay is looking at a difficult start. And the Hawks, meanwhile, are showing real improvement. One of the things that's really improving their team, and who saw this when they made the trade with Florida? Seth Jones goes to Florida, helps them win a Stanley Cup. No doubt. He was fantastic in the playoffs. But Spencer Knight, the little-known goaltender that went from the Florida Panthers to the Chicago Blackhawks, is now the number 1 goalie in Chicago. And he's tied for 6th in goals against average, 3rd in save percentage. You know, that ends up being a pretty good trade for Chicago.
Who was it that had Spencer Knight as their breakout goalie this year?
I think I did.
You did. You did. Me and Marek had our guys, and you just pulled one out, and it happened to be Spencer Knight. And as you said, very impressive stats in the early going. And the Blackhawks as a team, 5th now in the NHL in goals against average. So props to Jeff Blashill and the start that the Blackhawks are enjoying. Another club that probably we've expected to make the move a little bit sooner than the Blackhawks, and they are certainly doing that right now, the Utah Mammoth. 7-4 win over St. Louis. Logan Cooley with a natural hat trick within 4 minutes and 48 seconds of the first period. The usually reliable Joel Hofer chased after the second of the 3 goals scored by Cooley, played just 7 minutes and 57 seconds. The Mammoth are the first team in the Western Conference to 6 wins with a 6-2-0 mark.
And this game, and we should have mentioned this about Tampa, Chicago beats Tampa in Tampa. Utah goes into St. Louis and beats St. Louis at home. So Jim Montgomery will not be happy. John Cooper is not happy, but it's a great start for Utah. And we had predicted that they would be pushing at those wild card spots. And that's still my prediction, is that they're going to be banging on the door to take one of those Western wild card spots in the playoffs.
And you have to think that if they get in, the Blues are going to be one of the teams that are going to be victimized.
Absolutely. I mean, you're not going to victimize Winnipeg, Dallas, and Colorado, or Edmonton or Vegas. It's not hard to say who's definitely in the playoffs in the
Yep.
West. So, yeah, St. Louis, this is a big game when Utah comes in and beats you.
And hangs a 4 spot on you in the first 11 minutes.
Yeah, well, that goes part of the territory.
You know who else is 6-2?
Go ahead.
The Pittsburgh Penguins. We talked about Chicago winning a game Thursday that they wouldn't have won a year ago. And I think you could say the same thing about the Penguins. Winning in Florida 5-3. The Penguins had 3 2-goal leads in this game. The Panthers cut it to a goal each time, and the Penguins managed to respond. Sidney Crosby, 2 goals and an assist. He is now 2 points shy of 1,700 in his career. Tristan Jarry with 34 saves. And the Penguins, 6th in goals against average in the NHL, right behind the Blackhawks. You got to give credit to Dan Muse and the work that he has done with the Penguins so far.
Oh, you do. And I know we're not supposed to give away what we write on Neil's Nuggets or on Neil's Picks, but I did say, for those of you who are history buffs, the news of my demise is premature. And I wrote that about the Pittsburgh Penguins because everybody was calling for their demise, including yours
us.
truly. Yes. No, but it's too early to say what they are. But this start, 6-2-0, is as much as we say about a bad start. This start gives you room for error down the road. 6-2-0. You got some room for error as the season goes along now.
You build a little bit of capital, and every point you get now is one less point that you need to get in March and April if you're a bubble team trying to get into the playoffs, and a team in the West that is doing exactly that as well. The Anaheim Ducks, 4-2-1 after a 7-5 win in Boston on Thursday. Mikael Granlund with 5 points. Remember that nice 3-0 start that the Bruins had?
Yeah.
They've lost 6 straight now.
The one thing about Anaheim is we called Anaheim to be a much better team, an improved team, with Joel Quenneville behind the bench, the additions that they made in the offseason that Pat Verbeek did. We said that Anaheim would be a better team, and we predicted that they might even be a playoff team, and that still looks good for the Ducks. And again, 4-2-1 gives them room for error as the season goes along.
The Buffalo Sabres have now won 3 out of 4 after that 0-3 start. They start rookie Colton Ellis against Detroit on Wednesday. It's his NHL debut, and he snaps the Red Wings' 5-game winning streak, 4-2 win. He had excellent poise, had very good mechanics, went side to side well. Just another sign that the Sabres trying to take that next step. Good effort by them. But for the Wings, not only did they have their winning streak snapped, they go into UBS Arena on Thursday and get whacked by the Islanders. So that 5-game winning streak is now turned into a 2-game losing streak. Islanders winning this one 7-2. The news here, though, Matthew Schaefer, 7 goals for the Isles, and he goes pointless for the first time this season after opening the year with a 6-game point streak.
But still a real good player for them, obviously, and it's going to be a great player in the future. Detroit looked awful last night, right from the get-go. They not only looked like they played back-to-back, they looked like they played back-to-back-to-back-to-back. Right away, there was a goal by D'Angelo that probably should have been stopped, and, they just never got it going. The Red Wings were really never in the game, and they were thrashed by the Islanders last night at UBS Arena.
What impressed you about the Isles, who have won 4 straight now?
It seemed like they're playing together. They're on a little bit of a high. They're believing in themselves. They're looking like they believe in themselves. Horvat's having a real good start to his season, who's a really important guy. Barzal is having a pretty good start to his season, although Barzal is Barzal. They're all showing up, and they're all playing hard. And you're not seeing the absence of Dobson and Brock Nelson the way that I thought you would. Everybody's playing by committee there, and they got good goaltending from David Riddick last night. Actually, is playing better than Sorokin. I don't know why Ilya Sorokin isn't playing up to his standard, but he's not. And so, yeah, the Islanders, a lot of surprising teams so far this season, including the Islanders.
And a little footnote here, because you'd mentioned Noah Dobson and Emil Heineman, forward, who was the return as part of that Dobson deal. He's got 5 goals already.
And they got the 2 first-round picks that are developing, pick 16 and 17 in the draft. So to this point, real good return on the Dobson deal. And Montreal's got the guy they wanted to go along with Lane Hudson. But you know what? For right now, things are happy on Long Island. And besides Long Island people being happy, there's another group way out on the West Coast that's happy, and that's the Pua Shockies. I mean, they finally get in the win column.
Well, not too poor anymore, because they visited Madison Square Garden on Thursday, and something had to give here. Either the Sharks were going to win their first game or the Rangers were going to win their first home game. San Jose winds up taking this one 6-5 in overtime. Macklin Celebrini, second career hat trick plus 2 assists, one of those coming on Will Smith's winner in the extra session. Smith himself had 4 points, 2 goals, 2 assists. Taylor Radish had a hat trick for New York. But one of the side stories in this game was a first period fight between Matt Rempe and Ryan Reeves. Rempe was responding to a hit that was made on Juuso Parssinen and stood up relatively well with Reeves. But the thing that I believe people should take note of here, Rempe is not a very good fighter. He's big, he's game, he's willing, but he takes a lot of hard punches. He did get a couple off on Reeves, but he receives a lot more than he doles out. And he actually left this game after this fight. Team is calling it an upper body injury. Depends who you listen to, because maybe it was his hand in throwing a punch. Maybe it was his head from absorbing a punch. And this is something that we actually pointed out, Neil, 2 years ago.
Yeah, and he's a gangly guy. I mean, he's loved in the Garden because he's 6'8" and all this, but he's not Ty Domi. I mean, who was the opposite, who was 5'8", but could stand up to anybody. Ryan Reeves has been around a long time and is a big, strong guy. You know, he threw Rempe around pretty good and got some good shots in there. And as you said, Rempe's not a great fighter, really. I mean, he's just tall and has big, long arms and can, you know, hold guys off. But Reeves definitely got the better of him, and I wouldn't be surprised that he left because of concussion issue there, because he took a couple of serious blows to the noggin.
On a kind of happier note here, remember Ryan Warsofsky, head coach for the Sharks, after they got shut out on Saturday against Pittsburgh, said that he would give up one of his kids for a bleeping win. Well, if he had actually done that, now he can get his kids back. And he actually apologized for making that comment. But good on him. Good on the Sharks. They're off the schneid, and maybe we're going to see some uptick from this club as well.
Perhaps. They're not a complete team by any stretch. But boy, that Celebrini kid is good. And we talk sometimes about maybe it's unfair to compare him and Bedard. But to this point, Celebrini looks to me to be a much more complete player than Connor Bedard.
At the same time, I do think the one area that the Sharks really have to button up is the team defense, because unlike Chicago, who now plays relatively well without the puck, San Jose is yet to find that piece of their game.
Yeah, and you're right. And they're great offensive talent. They are amazing. When they were on the island playing the Islanders, they dominated them in the first period. But then defensive breakdowns led them to be behind by the end of the first period, and then it all went to hell in a handbasket after that.
Let's go west, young man. Couple of really good late games on Thursday. The Edmonton Oilers with a 6-5 win over the Montreal Canadiens, but this game had so many ebbs and flows in it. The Canadiens overcame a 3-1 deficit late in the second period, scoring 3 goals in $1.52 to take the lead into the intermission. 2 of those goals came by Cole Caulfield. He's up to 7 now. And the Canadiens actually got the first goal of the third period by Alex Newhook to take a 5-3 lead. But then they took 4 consecutive penalties in the third period. And actually, Edmonton had the last 6 power plays in the game. And the Canadiens were really ticked off about the officiating in this one. Oilers wind up tying the game on 2 power play goals by Leon Draisaitl and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. And then the game-winning goal by Vasily Podkolzin with just 69 seconds left. What was so interesting about this game was really in the second period, that 3-1 lead by the Oilers probably flattered them, because as the Canadiens came back, you saw something that you don't usually see with the Oilers. And that is they were having problems with somebody else's speed.
You don't see that with the Oilers, obviously, because of their speed. You know what? Again, let's talk about the Habs, their improvement. Many wondered, were they going to be taking the next step this season, or were they going to be taking a step backwards this season? They got into the playoffs last year as a -20 with goal differential, so they were very fortunate to be in the playoff tournament. But this year they look for real. And to go into Edmonton and play this well is something really good for them. And they're showing themselves as they go through the season early that they're for real. And that's really who you're trying to prove it to, is to prove it to yourself so that you keep the confidence going.
They played consecutive games in Alberta, winning in Calgary on Wednesday. And the support that this club gets all across Canada, but watching those 2 games and hearing the number of Canadian fans that were both in Calgary and in Edmonton last night was really something.
And of course, we all know when the Montreal Canadiens go to Florida, that's really a place where there's a lot of Montreal fans. Why? Because there's so many snowbirds from Quebec that go down to Florida for the winter time and get to see the Habs when they go down there. So good for the Montreal Canadiens and their start,
despite the loss last night. But speaking of Quebec, the Colorado Avalanche donned the old Nordiques uniform, the 30-year anniversary since that move from Quebec City. They played the Carolina Hurricanes, i.e. the Hartford Whalers, who wore their green and white uniforms, road last night. The Avalanche overcame a 4-1 deficit in this game. Scott Wedgwood was pulled for Trent Miner at just 13:40 of the first period, having given up all 4 goals. Miner played very well, stopping all 20 shots in regulation and overtime. But Seth Jarvis, who scored his 7th goal earlier in the game, got the shootout winner. So it ends up 5-4 for the Whalers over the Nordiques. And I got to tell you something about these throwback uniforms, because you start watching the game and you know it's Nathan McKinnon, you know it's Cale Makar, you know it's Sebastian Aho, you know it's Andrei Svechnikov. But as you watch at the beginning of the game, you almost feel, because of the uniform, that you're watching different players.
Yeah, well, that's right. And it's quite a thing to see those uniforms come back out. By the way, trivia question for you. Who was the last opposing general manager to have his team play against the Quebec Nordiques?
It must have been Neil Smith, if you're asking.
It was. In 1995, when the New York Rangers knocked out the Quebec Nordiques in the first round of the playoffs, and that ended the Quebec Nordiques. The next year, they moved to Denver and became the Colorado Avalanche.
And we don't want to leave the Hurricanes out, because they became the Hurricanes after leaving Hartford in 1997. A couple of other games that we want to hit on. The LA Kings with consecutive overtime wins to start their 5-game road trip. On Tuesday, they beat the Blues. On Thursday, they beat the Stars. Adrian Kempe, unrestricted free agent to be, both of the overtime winners. And the Seattle Kraken going to Winnipeg, shut out the Jets 3-0, 2 of those goals coming on empty netters. Joey Decord with a 32-save shutout.
Another team that is surprising. You wonder how these gaming places make all their money. Because are you really going to bet on Seattle over Winnipeg? Most of the bettors would go with Winnipeg. And Seattle, you never expect them to go in and beat. The Winnipeg Jets are having a real good start to their season. I've been circling surprises last night. Listen to them. Chicago, Utah, Pittsburgh, Anaheim, San Jose, Montreal, in the fact that they stayed with Edmonton the whole game, ended up losing 6-5, but still. LA in Dallas wins. Dallas, by the way, hasn't had a great start to their season as of late. And now Seattle Kraken go into Winnipeg and beat the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, a lot of surprises last night.
So I guess we were on target with the theme of the show.
We sure were.
Injury news. We're going to start in Vegas. Captain Mark Stone, now on LTIR, the wrist injury that was suffered Saturday in Calgary. The earliest he can return is November 15th. And Aiden Hill, goaltender, is now week to week with a lower body injury suffered in the win over Carolina on Monday. For Toronto defenseman Chris Tanev on IR with an upper body injury after a collision with Dawson Mercer on Tuesday. It appeared that when Tanev went to make a hit, Mercer's helmet hit Tanev's jaw. So Dakota Mermis has been called up from the Toronto Marlies. How about this, Neil? The Maple Leafs had 2 Dakotas on their team right now, with Mermis joining Dakota Joshua.
So they're going to have to call one north and one south.
I so know your humor by now. For the New York Islanders, Alexander Romanov on IR with an upper body injury. It is possible he could go to LTIR. We're going to have to wait and see on that one. Pierre Engvall, out for the season with ankle surgery. He had missed all of training camp with hip surgery over the summer. So this is a signing by Lou Lamoriello that has not exactly delivered for New York.
It just gets worse and worse with Engvall. Lou Lamoriello was in Toronto. For some reason, he must have loved Engvall when he was running the Leafs, and Engvall was playing there. And he made a trade to get him and signed him to a big contract. And he spent some of the time in Bridgeport, the Islanders farm team. He's been up and down and now is going to miss all this season. So a pretty bad signing, as it turns out, and a bad trade.
See that one becoming a buyout relatively soon. For the Edmonton Oilers, Kasperi Kapanen, out week to week, suffered his injury Sunday in Detroit trying to make a hit. But good news for the Oilers. Zach Hyman skating with the club again, close to returning from the dislocated wrist suffered in the Western Final against Dallas. He could be back as early as November 1st.
And that's huge news for the Oilers. They need him back in the lineup.
Any updates?
Maxim Shabanov, who did not dress for the Islanders last night, is not at practice today. And John Klingberg of the aforementioned San Jose Sharks won't play tonight, but could be ready for the weekend. Nick Leddy is ruled out for the Sharks. Dickinson should be back in for the Sharks. And Michael Misa is not expected to be in the lineup tonight. And Mackenzie Blackwood, the goaltender for the Avalanche, is not expected to travel with the team for the upcoming weekend games.
Well, Trent Miner did a pretty good job. And just to go back to the Sharks there in Jersey, on Friday evening, the 6-1 Jersey Devils off to one of the best starts in the NHL. So upcoming this weekend, 25 games between Friday and Sunday, highlighted by Washington and Columbus, Friday evening, Alex Ovechkin, just 2 goals shy of 900 in his career. On Saturday, Colorado is at Boston, Vegas at Florida. Colorado and Vegas, the last 2 teams without a regulation loss. But I'm also going to be looking at Anaheim and Tampa, with the Ducks off to a good start. And as you'd mentioned, the Lightning struggling big time. And this one, Neil, Utah at Minnesota. Want to see if the Mammoth can keep it going against the Minnesota Wild club that I believe is going to be on the bubble this year. And I said earlier that if Utah gets into the playoffs, it may be St. Louis that is the team that falls out, but it could also be the Wild.
It very much could be. They're also right there in the bubble lock challenge.
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll get to that sometime in late February, early March after the Olympics. And on Sunday, Colorado at Jersey, Vegas at Tampa, Utah at Winnipeg, Colorado and Jersey among the tops in the NHL. Vegas without a regulation loss, Tampa struggling, and again, Utah getting another test playing consecutive games in Minnesota and against the Winnipeg Jets. So with that, we're going to wrap up our show. Remember, NHLWraparound.com. We have New York-centric exclusive content there from Patrick Hoffman, his latest piece on the great start by the first overall draft pick, Matthew Schaefer. We've got Neil's Nuggets, and we've got Smith's Picks. So I want to actually touch on something here because I kind of know where you have your evening meals based on what your selections are. So on Wednesday, I think you went out for dinner because you picked all road teams, and then you wanted the home cooking on Thursday because you picked all home teams. Would that be correct?
No, it's because I picked the wrong teams for sure on Thursday. However, I can't blame myself because you couldn't have picked the winners last night. I mean, it was just impossible. Things just didn't go the way you would expect that they would go with the teams that were playing.
You had a great hot streak. You're struggling a little bit, but isn't this a microcosm of what an NHL season really is?
It really is. It really is. You just don't know what's going to happen. And that's what's good about the league, because if you knew what was going to happen, it wouldn't be any fun.
If it was predictable, why would we be so captivated the way we are each night?
Exactly. And there's parity in the league. And now there's becoming more parity, as we talked about, with even Chicago and San Jose, 2 of the underbelly teams of the league are looking pretty good right now and look very competitive.
Chicago definitely, jury's still out on the Sharks. Short shifts coming up next Monday, and then on NHL Wraparound next Wednesday. A very important show, Neil.
It's an extremely important show with current events going on, especially this NBA fiasco that's to do with gambling and also organized crime and stuff. We're going to have on our show a lady that I was fortunate enough to meet at a fundraiser last week, Dr. Lippy Roy, who's a Torontonian but works out of New York. She's an internal medicine physician, board certified in addiction medicine. And she also serves as a clinical assistant professor at the NYU Langone Health. She was the former chief of addiction medicine for the New York City jail system, including Rikers Island. But she's going to talk to us about gambling and addiction, and maybe we'll get into a little bit of head trauma. But the gambling in pro sports and gambling in general is an addictive behavior for some people, not for everybody, not nearly for everybody, but for some people. And Dr. Lippy Roy, who's an expert in this area, we're going to have a great conversation with her about this issue of addiction and gambling.
Extremely topical given the events that affected the NBA on Thursday. So with that, we say farewell. Enjoy the hockey this weekend, and we'll speak to you with short shifts on Monday.